It's turtles all the way down. I have been waiting for the right time to make a video about this because this is when the skeleton key really shines. Okay, this is basically what it's all about. This is the skeleton key at its nth degree, doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Where do I even begin with this? The skeleton key, we know, is a way of adding multiple dimensions to a concept. You start with something we might take for granted, but that obviously exists in a binary. And we get that binary and we expand it so that each of those two concepts, the two complements, have their own respective shadow concepts, right? So we have these shadow concepts. That's the foundation of the skeleton key. And we've also been showing how we can plug multiple things into the skeleton key at once, but this is taking that possibility and literally bringing it to another level. The skeleton key is supposed to function as a fractal. Okay, so first of all, what the fuck? Right? Like what? But all of life is a fractal. Yeah, that's another video. So that means that we've got the skeleton key, and within each slot of the skeleton key is a smaller skeleton key, and it keeps going like that all the way down. I'm not sure yet. I don't know. I'd have to test it. But my real drive and curiosity is whether the skeleton key were to keep expanding and going up. So in this sense, what we're looking at in front of us now is a fractal that's zooming in. But I'm curious, if the fractal were to keep zooming out, would we reach a sort of understanding or a base concept, in the sense that all fractals have a root, right? And they begin from somewhere. And in a sort of, I guess you could say, cosmological sense, or concerning the creation of the universe, those fractals that make up the world also began at a certain point and have a most fundamental iteration. All that being said, we're looking at a skeleton key of the personality, and that means that we've got in the hubris slot the hero and the nevma, and I've made this about myself, so I've put the anima, but that's obviously can be the animus. So the hero, the anima, the demon, and the nemesis. Over time, I've picked up bits and pieces from a lot of different Jungians. Obviously the man himself, John Beebe, Ulanov and Ulanov, von Franz, these types of people who and even YouTubers, God forbid, who have had a lot of interesting things to say, and my sort of understanding of Jungian typology, that in shorthand is often called MBTI, even though that refers frankly to something quite different. I have this highly eclectic Jungian typology here, which sort of has cherry-picked a lot of the innovations from a lot of different creators, and at some point things of my own have come in there. I don't know what's from what. I don't remember at this point, but this is the one that I love, and this is the one that I use. And we've got basically the hero as the conscious mind, the anima or the animus as the subconscious mind, the nemesis being the unconscious, and the demon will be called the superego, but I just call it the sort of, the bottom of the unconscious. I don't know if that's even necessary to explain all this, but my point is we've got this sort of new way of displaying the conscious unconscious division and arrangement of different archetypes within the mind. The shadow of the hero being the demon, and all these different correlations. And we've shown how they can flow into each other and really have interesting dynamics between each other. A lot of things always that we can come back to, talking about anima or animus possession, identification with different aspects of the personality, which aren't the hero, which aren't the ego, and that would be a breathing through different slots. Nonetheless, okay? This is all based on myself. Over the past week or so, I've been muscle testing. I'll explain that all another time. I've been muscle testing where things correlate for myself, and plotted that over multiple days to show a sort of timeline, a progression of a real example, an actual lived example of what the breathing might look like. And that will hopefully make the sort of overcomplication of this fractal less like a wall, something a little bit more accessible, maybe, or grippable. Anyway, let's zoom in. So within each of these bigger archetypes, we've got a smaller skeleton key, which is, and you'll recall from the Madonna-whore fuckboy simp episode, different iterations of those broader archetypes. So basically the Madonna-whore skeleton key actually belongs to the fractal of the broader personality skeleton key, only it's relating to the anima. And so within each of these, say for example the Madonna archetype within the broader anima archetype, we have another skeleton key which is continuing to modulate the expression of the archetype on an even finer level. And you'll recall the episode I did on love and growth. What number was that? Doesn't matter. That skeleton key now fits into this one, right? So we've got this real babushka doll, which is frankly fabulous. And I talk about adding a dimension, adding a layer to all of this. And I think the skeleton key has always been about breathing and having life in concepts. And that's the fourth dimension, in the sense of the one dimension being the singular concept, which is completely static. The two dimensions being the sort of the spectrum or the binary. We have the thing and its opposite. The three dimensions, just adding depth to that opposition, having shadows and different expressions of that same dichotomy. The fourth dimension is, and God, this needs another video too, hey. The fourth dimension is about how that binary, with its depth of expression, with its shadow expressions, moves through time. That's what the fourth dimension is. The fourth dimension is time. So whenever there's a breathing in the skeleton key, that's an expression of the fourth dimension within the concepts. Anyway, what a digression. Let me just get into the example and see if we can walk through some of the points of interest here and actually leave with an understanding. Yeah? So don't worry about the sub-archetypes for the other things. Obviously, we've covered the Madonna-whore one. The other ones will get their own video in due time, but know that there's a skeleton key for everything, and I'll keep saying that because it's true. You want me to skeleton key something, you ask for it, I'll put it in a skeleton key for you. But I think the things that are the most important to point out here is that, let's just start. Let's just look at the Madonna now, right? So say, broadly speaking, the way that I relate to my anima, and by the way, the progression of time shown here is starting with the orange and moving like a rainbow towards blue. Yeah? Orange, yellow, green, blue. And then we see, for example, the Madonna begins in its own sub-expression of acceptance and stasis. And when I next checked in on it, it was moving towards destruction and fear. And if we remember from that episode, that's actually the return to the generative breathing of the skeleton key. And it was actually great. And it stayed there for a while until it was ready to start progressing into change and hate. And maybe progressing isn't the right word. And I've spoken a little bit about breathing and the skeleton key and what different flows through the concepts actually mean in correlation with through this sort of analogous understanding of breath work. That's another episode that is always underwriting every skeleton key, in terms of the cake. And I say the cake with the layering of different skeleton keys on top of each other as opposed to within each other in this instance of the fractal. Wow. Right, so we have all these flows you can see back and forth, sometimes between growth and love, that generative cycle, going between fear and hate, that sort of expansive or breath holding cycle. And that's happening above and below. For example, the freak case on its way into the Madonna. But something very interesting here is that when I checked in on it, I noticed that in its sort of state of neglect, where I had been letting, before I knew to even plug it into this fractal, before I knew what was going on, there were trends, which I've given a little red circle there to highlight. There were trends that signified degeneration within the psyche, right? That negative side of the skeleton key. So for example, we have in the hero where it was moving from abandoning into smothering, or in the nemesis where on a smaller scale, my relationship between the belligerent nemesis and the enemy nemesis was moving between hate and acceptance. There are only three examples, which is, it's relatively good, because if there were more, that would mean that things were worse. But, you know, it was also interesting. So I saw that. I thought, oh, this can't be. But since it's only a trajectory, that arrow, that trend can actually be shifted. So I took this into journaling, right? And I asked myself the questions of going back to the love and growth episode and the states that bridge between different ones. So between change and growth, there was direction. And between hate and love, there was forgiveness, right? You can watch that episode to get the rest of it. But there's these sort of bridging concepts. So I saw that my relationship to certain parts of my psyche were degenerating because I was allowing them to persist in their hate or persist in their acceptance and tolerating these parts of myself and then getting fed up with them as opposed to actually making a real change or like trying to grow or remove the problems, right? We have these sort of this dysfunctional status quo that's never going to resolve itself, right? And I saw that was happening and I thought, wait a minute, with conscious intervention, now that I see this trajectory, can I not just ask myself, what is it that I hate about this thing in myself? And could I try and understand it and then even maybe forgive it? Or what is it that I'm trying so hard to change but don't really have the right direction for? You know, what path can I find forward to actually make this thing in me grow? And when I started asking these questions, and I've done it many times since, I've actually been able to change that trajectory. Likewise, when something's in acceptance or stasis, I ask myself, okay, what blockage do I need to remove? Or what do I need to recognize as scary within this? I'm trying to push it consciously, actively, away from where it was going to go, away from where it would have gone if I left it, back towards the generative cycle. It's the same as taking charge of your breathing with your conscious mind instead of letting yourself hyperventilate or breathe shallowly or get out of puff or hold your breath. I'm choosing to push it into this different direction where it will start to grow and heal. And likewise with the abandoning hero, I thought, okay, I can feel it, and this is almost self-explanatory, like I can feel that a lot of the strengths of my hero archetype had completely left me in a way that can be great, because the hero thinks it can fucking do everything and it doesn't give the other parts of the psyche a chance to prove their mettle and actually probably do a better job sometimes. But after it had been gone for so long, the sort of suffocation, to keep using that breathwork analogy, was that when it did come back, it was beginning to smother me and over apply itself and spread it everywhere and sort of arrogate responsibility and try and do things even when it wasn't helpful or needed or wasn't even a strength of the hero. It was, I could feel it happening. And I thought, how can I turn this hero archetype into a savior instead of a smotherer? So we have the hero, which is completely abandoned the rest of the psyche. And at the time I just accepted that. And then it rather quickly began to move towards love. First through fear. It has to sort of transmute through fear before it can enter love again. But at the same time, it was shifting into the smothering. And I needed to figure out, okay, what about the hero can be a savior instead of a smotherer? And I thought, imagine it's like a village and hero comes along and he's like, oh, I see you got this and problem, and I'm going to start doing, and he's fucking tearing up the village. And he thinks he's helping them, but really he's just taken over and he's doing a lot of harm and building a lot of resentment. And I said to myself, okay, if I was to actually stop and listen and ask what needs to be done. What do we need from the hero right now? And do exactly that and nothing more than that. That's the savior. The villagers say to the hero, we need you to kill this goblin who's like coming in and, I don't know, keeps like eating our, I was going to say eating the thatching in the roof. Have you ever heard of a goblin that does that? Anyway, we've got holes in our roof. We need you to kill this goblin or like get him to therapy. And to sort of concretize that example back into the typology, we're talking from the subjectivity of an ENFP here, which means that the hero correlates with the extroverted intuition, right? That's at the top of my ego. And I was all out of ideas until I started being flooded with different possibilities and a lot of unhelpful options and pathways that really weren't relevant and were just distracting. I thought, okay, what I really wanted was for the hero to come back into my life, bring me something novel, bring me something that's going to add a breath of fresh air into my life and really change things in a way that I couldn't predict, and just breathe some life into me, but one thing, just one thing completely new. I didn't want a flurry of random possibilities that I didn't want. I just wanted a radical shift in my life. And so with that intention, I was able to shift the expression of the ego towards the savior, which is, as we can see, where it's currently sitting. And I've been consciously doing this with all the types. Anytime I see, okay, it's been stuck in one of the shadow expressions for a while, or worse, it's beginning to degenerate, let's give it a little nudge. Let's give it a nudge. And, I did that. I've done that a little bit in all of them over the past few days, just asking those same questions. So this really gives an extreme level of fine detail and dynamic, changing, time-dependent expressions to these concepts, where you can come back and say, yesterday I was afraid of the Madonna, or the day before that I used to just accept that the nemesis would not play much of a role in my life. Things like that, where it's like we can push them around, we can choose how they express, and they will, of their own accord, through how you're using them consciously and unconsciously, and the sort of inherent need for the flow in life and for them to breathe and continue living, they will just be moving regardless. Right, so and with that journey, let me actually just pull up an example. Because what's the point in being mystic, being mysterious, when I can give you an example? I asked myself, among other things, what in the nemesis as an enemy can I find fear, recognition, and the removal of blockages in? I opened it with that and I wrote what came to me. I wrote, when I've just come to accept the nemesis, when I no longer really celebrate it or feel anything in particular towards it, I become apathetic. And remembering now that the nemesis for an ENFP or an ENTP is introverted intuition, which is about pathfinding and the way forward for an individual. Of all those alternate possibilities in extroverted intuition, NI is the path that is intended to be trod. It's the trajectory. So to feel that I'm apathetic towards my nemesis, even when it is my enemy, is to just accept that it will work against me and cause me strife. I need to recognize that my nemesis will stay exactly as it is or degenerate unless I come to recognize a deeper truth about it. Right? And that's the recognition, the alchemizing of acceptance into fear. What is that truth? So long as I accept my nemesis as the enemy, it will destroy my future. The pathway I choose and the things I want will contradict my best interests, and I will just allow it. What I need to recognize is that this is an enemy to be feared, that I haven't understood or known it fully and still don't, that it is capable of damaging me and must be treated as such. I asked, what do I need to destroy in this enemy? Because, again, in stasis, for stasis to alchemize into destruction, there needs to be the removal of blockages. Those things that are in the way of future growth need to be removed. So I asked, what do I need to destroy in this enemy? There are two things. The first is that it is constantly trying to slip desires that aren't your own into your future. The second is that it is a drain of energy as thought and affirmation and actions go to these bad paths. I need to remove my investment of energy into these paths. So it's not just that I'm thinking I need to go down a path that's the wrong one and that's causing me distress. It's what if I'm actually starting to walk that wrong path? a lot of my energy was going into this. It was a real problem, and to just accept it and not fear and see the real consequences of that, well, it's untenable. So I was writing, I had a lot of desires, a lot of things that I was really fixating on, and then would also at the same time feel ambivalent about, and it was doing my head in because I thought, well, I want this, well, I feel like I should be wanting this, and it's what I think about, and yet when I really reflect, I don't care. I know it's not that important to me right now, right? The desire for love, a partner, for a car, for travel, for a job, to be wealthy, to have more things. A lot of the stuff we're told to want, sure, but a lot of the things that people with very good intentions always remind you to get. always fighting different impositions of desires. And so I thought, if I can remove these desires and accept that they aren't mine and that I'm draining my energy if I move towards them, that will shift my nemesis's enemy away from its trajectory towards me hating it and resenting what's happened, and towards a healthy and respectful fear, where I'm beginning to destroy those harmful elements and really recognize what that enemy is capable of, instead of resenting it after the fact when it's too late. Right? So I think that's a good example, and I've done a lot of them. Really, anyone could do it for themselves as well. That said, the way to get a clear image of where things are, because the ego always gets in the way. It always has a narrative of where it wants things to be. It's like, oh, well, I would never be degenerating. It's obviously in the love section, or it's obviously transitioning here. But to muscle test, and I guess, I'll definitely have to make a video on muscle testing, and ask yourself, okay, with this regard to the ego, in complete truth, in accordance with the higher self, this is where my hero is on the skeleton key. And it will give a yes or it'll give a no. Right? That's how I've been doing it. And that's why I feel extremely certain about it, because it's been sort of validated on a bodily and spiritual level through that invaluable tool. Anyway, that's all. And I've scratched the surface here because it's unlimited. I could plug any number of concepts into this to different depths. I could zoom in or out. And I didn't really talk about all of them, but what's the point in doing that when I can just make more videos? I hope this has been enjoyable, if not vaguely alarming in the best way, because life is magical, and the skeleton key is only reflecting that depth and the dynamism that's already there, living, breathing, glowing in everything. So my absolute pleasure to be making these videos and learning and sharing at the same time. Really my pleasure. So thank you for watching and being a part of that. Ciao.